Not every kind of pain begins with separation. There is a much quieter kind of wound. It is born when you keep staying beside someone who has never truly valued who you are. You offer sincerity, but what you receive in return is indifference. You try your best to understand them, while they turn that very understanding into a rope to tighten their control. You forgive with an open heart, and they treat it as a guarantee that you will never turn away. People with deep compassion rarely leave after the first time they are hurt. They stay for a very long time, not because they are weak, but because they can always see the wounded part hidden behind the other person's actions. They convince themselves that maybe the other person is just in pain. Maybe they only need more time. Maybe if they love more deeply, forgive more generously, and become even gentler, everything will eventually change. But there are people who do not need your love in order to heal. What they need is your energy to maintain their own illusion of power. They are not truly seeking a sincere connection. What they want is a reaction. They want to see you confused. They want you to blame yourself. They want you to keep trying to explain. And they want you to prove over and over again that you still care. Until one day, the compassionate person awakens. That awakening is not loud. It does not begin with a heated argument, with a firm declaration, or with a dramatic act of revenge. It arrives quietly. At some point, you look back at everything you have endured and suddenly realize you were not born to become the place where someone else stores their darkness. You no longer crave victory in their game of control. You no longer feel the need to prove that you were right. You no longer hope that they will understand the pain you have carried. All you need now is peace. And the very moment you choose peace over reaction, the narcissist begins to lose their power, because what frightens them most has never been your anger. Anger can be used against you, twisted until you are made to look like the problem. What they truly fear is your calmness, a calmness that does not need to justify itself, does not need permission, and does not need anyone's approval. That is the moment they realize you are no longer within their reach. This article will take you through 7 signs that show the narcissist has lost their power over you, not because you destroyed them, but because you reclaimed yourself, not because you made them suffer, but because you stopped giving them the right to determine your emotions, your worth, and your life. Part 1. When you stop being shaken by them. There was a time when even a single silence from them was enough to drown you in sleepless nights. An unfinished message, a cold look, a deliberately incomplete sentence, all of it turned into tiny blades, cutting into your self-worth. You replayed every gesture, every word that had been spoken, searching through your memory for some mistake you could quickly make up for. And that, right there, was the fertile ground where their power grew. The narcissist never truly wanted you to be at peace. What they craved was seeing you shaken. The more insecure you became, the more important they felt. The more you explained yourself, the more they gave themselves the right to judge you. The more you bowed your head and apologized for something you had never done, the more satisfied they became, sitting high above you. Then one day, you became quiet in a completely different way. They were silent, and you were silent too. But no longer with the kind of silence that holds its breath and waits. They were cold, and you no longer rushed to fix things. They deliberately left you in longing, and you stopped standing there, counting every passing second. They dropped a half-hidden, half-revealed sentence to see whether you would fall into the trap, and you simply read it, understood it, and let it dissolve like a passing breeze. That change is exactly what makes them lose their balance. They had become too familiar with a version of you who was always anxious to make peace, always forcing yourself to understand, always terrified of the possibility of losing them. When that version of you disappears without a trace, they become confused. unsure of who they are now facing. They may put on an indifferent face. They may pretend to be busy, detached, or arrogant, but deep inside, they begin to feel lost, because in the past, all they had to do was pull one small string, and you immediately moved according to their rhythm. Now, they pull hard, but the other end of the string remains completely silent. This is the first sign that their power is beginning to crack, not because you are speaking more, but because you have stopped giving them what they crave, most your emotional reactions. Someone who truly loves you feels peaceful when you are peaceful. The narcissist is the complete opposite. They become uneasy whenever you are no longer emotionally tangled, because your confusion used to be living proof that they could still control you. When you become still, they lose the mirror that once reflected their illusion of power, and from that moment on, the balance quietly begins to shift in the opposite direction. Part 2. When their old tricks no longer make you doubt yourself. The narcissist always has familiar ways to make you lose your calm. They know exactly how to send a cold, icy look in your direction. They know how to release a vague sentence just strong enough to make you blame yourself. They also know how to turn silence into a quiet pressure, making you feel as if you have done something wrong. They plant the feeling in your mind that you are too sensitive, too demanding, too complicated, or too weak. There was a time when that alone was enough to make your entire inner world collapse. You began to doubt your own intuition. You wondered whether you were overreacting. You tried to soften your own pain just to preserve a sense of peace in the atmosphere. You stayed silent not because your heart was calm, but because you were afraid of triggering their irritation. But when you awaken, something strange begins to happen quietly. The things that once pierced your heart no longer pass through you the way they used to. They may still be cold, but you no longer see their coldness as a judgment of your worth. They may still criticize you, but you no longer immediately believe that you are the one at fault. They may still twist the story, but now you can clearly see how they reshape the truth. You no longer react from your wound. You respond from awareness. That is a powerful boundary. When you react from pain, they still have a chance to control your emotions. But when you observe everything with clear eyes, they can no longer easily pull you back into the old cycle. You slowly begin to understand that not every accusation is the truth. Not every silence is something you need to chase. Not every outburst of anger from them is your fault. And not every time they play the victim means you have become the one who caused the wound. When you stop doubting yourself, the narcissist loses an important doorway into your mind. In the past, they manipulated you by shaking the trust you had in yourself. But now, you have begun to trust again what your own heart is telling you. You do not need to scream that you are right. You only need to know clearly what your own eyes have witnessed. You do not need to beg them to acknowledge your pain. You only need to stop denying it. And that is the moment fear begins to rise within them. Because an empath who has learned to trust their own intuition is very difficult to control. Part 3. They borrow your light to repaint their own image. When the narcissist realizes that pain can no longer be used as a rope to bind you, they often quietly switch to another method, copying you. They begin picking up the words that once belonged to your world. They talk about healing, growth, peace, positive energy, compassion, and even awakening. The person who once mocked you for being too deep suddenly starts posting thoughtful, philosophical lines. The person who once dismissed your emotions now talks endlessly about kindness. The person who once labeled you weak simply because you knew how to empathize now wants to appear as someone overflowing with love. At first, this may confuse you. You may wonder whether they have truly changed. But if you quietly observe closely, You will see that there is still a great distance between their words and who they truly are. They may know the language of healing by heart, but they lack the humility of someone who is truly being healed. They may preach about peace, yet still carry the need to control others inside them. They may speak a great deal about compassion, yet still turn away from taking responsibility for the wounds they caused. They may talk about awakening, but only to turn it into a new mask. This is not real transformation. It is only the way they rebuild their image. When they can no longer drain energy from you, they turn to borrowing your light so they can continue shining in the eyes of others. They learn to speak like you, think like you, and even retell the story as if they were the one who matured first. They want to take the very qualities that once made you special and turn them into props for their own performance. But there is one thing they can never fully copy: the truth within you. A true empath does not need to perform in order to appear deep. Their depth is formed by the times they face themselves, by the long silent nights when they had to bandage their own wounds, by the moments when they were hurt to the core but still chose not to become bitter. The narcissist, however, can only wear the appearance of that depth. They can imitate the image of light, but they cannot create its warmth. When you see them beginning to imitate you, do not rush to anger. See it as a silent confession. They are quietly admitting that what they once looked down on in you is exactly what they secretly long to possess. You do not need to fight to reclaim your own image. You only need to keep living truthfully, because what is real never has to argue with what is fake. Just let time pass, and the difference will reveal itself. Part 4. They swing between sweet words and aggressive tactics to win back your affection. When your silence continues, when your calmness can no longer be shaken, the narcissist often begins to panic. They are no longer certain that they can pull you back using the old methods, so they constantly change their approach. Today, they may become strangely gentle. A message is sent as if nothing ever happened. They ask whether you have been okay lately. They say they have been thinking a lot, that they miss you, that they only hope to talk to you one last time. But if you do not respond according to the script they expected, that gentleness can disappear in an instant. Immediately, they become cold, angry, and attacking. They say you are heartless, that you have changed, that you are cruel. They insist that you are the one who turned your back and abandoned them. They try to bend the story so that you become the guilty one, simply because you no longer give them the right to step into your life as they once did. This is a painfully familiar cycle: sweetness, guilt, anger, pity, and then sweetness again. The goal was never sincere connection. The goal is to make you confused and emotionally unstable. If you soften, they win. If you get angry, they also win. If you try to explain yourself, they gain another reason to pull you into a long argument. Every reaction you give can become new energy that feeds them. But this time, you can see the game clearly. You no longer rush to respond just because you fear being seen as cold. You no longer explain yourself just so they will not misunderstand you. You no longer try to prove that you are kind to someone who has grown used to using your kindness as a weapon to hurt you again. You realize that boundaries do not need to be loud. Some boundaries are drawn with one short sentence. Some boundaries are protected through silence. Some boundaries do not need to be announced. They only require that you do not walk back into the place that once broke you. When they can no longer pull you into the old cycle, the narcissist begins to lose their support. They once believed with certainty that you would always react, that if they created enough pressure, you would open the door just a little. But now, that door is closed, and what causes them to collapse was never your hatred. It is the fact that you no longer participate in the game. Part 5. Their perfect mask begins to collapse. The narcissist often clings tightly to their image. They crave being seen as good, pitiful, deep, misunderstood, always right, or uniquely captivating. In front of others, they build a very convincing version of themselves. But behind closed doors, they treat you in a completely different way. For a long time, this may have pushed you into loneliness. You saw a person no one else could see. You held the truth. But every time you wanted to speak, you feared being seen as bitter, negative, or someone deliberately trying to damage their image. But when you stop reacting, an important change quietly begins. The truth has room to step into the light on its own. In the past, they used your reactions as a curtain to hide their behavior. You cried, and they said you were weak. You got angry, and they said you were out of control. You explained yourself, and they accused you of making excuses. They turned your emotions into evidence to distract from what they had done. But when you remain silent, calm, and no longer get pulled into the chaos, that curtain slowly disappears. Without your reaction to blame, their behavior begins to show more clearly. People around them begin to notice the small contradictions. A story that does not match, an overreaction, a smile that feels dishonest, a kindness that only appears when there is an audience, a humble appearance that still secretly demands praise. The mask does not fall in a single moment. It cracks, little by little, and each crack allows others to see a part of the truth you once had to live with. This is when you understand that you do not need to run around exposing anyone. Those who live through falsehood will eventually be exhausted by their own falsehood. Those who manipulate the story for too long will eventually become trapped inside the very story they created. You only need to hold on to your own truth. You do not need to scream. You do not need to convince the entire world. You do not need to turn your pain into a public battle. Your calmness is already powerful enough. Because when you stop playing the chaotic role in their drama, their role also begins to lose the space it once had. And when the mask begins to crack, they will blame you. They will say you have changed, that you are cold, ungrateful, and that you made them lose face. But deep inside, you know the truth. You did not destroy their image. You simply stopped exhausting yourself to protect that image through your own painful silence. Part 6. They secretly watch you because they cannot stand seeing you live in peace. One of the things that makes the narcissist most uncomfortable is seeing that you are still okay without them. Not just okay on the outside, but truly stable from deep within. You no longer post indirect messages to hint at them. You no longer struggle to prove that you are happy. You no longer send out signals just to make them notice you. You simply live, and that is exactly what makes them quietly uneasy. They may not say a word, but they will quietly observe, sometimes through social media, sometimes through a mutual acquaintance, sometimes through hidden accounts, sometimes through indirect and complicated paths. They want to know whether you are still hurting, whether you still miss them, whether you are still shaken, not because they love you in the most sincere sense, but because they need confirmation that they still occupy a place in your mind. To a narcissist, being hated can sometimes feel better than being forgotten, because if you still hate them, it means you are still tied to them. If you still react, it means they still exist somewhere inside your emotions. But when you are peaceful, when you do not mention them, do not fight them, and do not try to prove anything, they suddenly feel themselves fading from your life. And that disappearance frightens their ego. They were once used to being the center of every pain you carried. No. That position no longer belongs to them. They once believed with certainty that without them, you could never live well. Yet you are still living, perhaps slowly, perhaps quietly, but clearly. You are returning to yourself step by step. Your peace becomes something they cannot explain. They understand anger. They understand clinging. They understand arguments. But they cannot understand the quiet freedom of someone who has truly let go. And because they cannot understand it, they begin to become obsessed. They want to know what you are thinking. They want to know who is beside you. They want to know whether you still remember everything that happened. They want to know whether they are still a shadow hanging over your life. But the most important thing is that you are no longer pulled by that energy. You may sense the eyes watching you, but you no longer live for them. You may know they are quietly following your steps, but you no longer adjust your life just to send them a message. You are no longer performing your healing. You are truly being healed, and that is exactly what they can never touch. Part 7. You step out of their system of control and return to being the master of yourself. The final sign is not found in what they do. It is found in what quietly moves within you. One day, you suddenly realize that you are no longer waiting for them to change. You no longer need a sincere apology. You no longer imagine a scene where they come back and finally understand everything. You no longer hope they will suffer, just so your heart can be comforted by a sense of justice. You no longer need them to admit their wrongs before you allow yourself to move forward. You simply move forward. This is a very quiet kind of freedom. It does not look like a victory scene in a movie. There is no swelling music, no final confrontation, no moment where they fall to their knees begging for forgiveness while you turn away in a glow of triumph. Real life is usually quieter than that, but also far more meaningful. It may be a morning when you wake up and realize you no longer want to reach for your phone, an afternoon when you pass by an old place and your heart no longer tightens, a night when you remember them, but the memory no longer pulls you into a deep abyss, a day when you hear someone mention their name, and something inside you remains calm, not because everything never hurt you, but because the pain no longer has the right to control your life. You have left their system of control, not only by walking away from a relationship, but by letting go of the old role you used to play, the one who kept fixing everything, the one who kept waiting, the one who kept sacrificing, the one who kept blaming themselves, the one who kept trying to love harder just to be treated with more kindness. You understand that love should not require you to trade away your soul. Forgiveness should not turn you into a place where someone else stores their darkness. Kindness should not mean allowing someone to hurt you without consequence. You have not become cruel. You have only become clearer. You have not closed your heart. You have only stopped placing it in the hands of someone who never knew how to cherish it. You are not holding on to hatred. You are simply not turning back. And when you reach that threshold, the narcissist no longer holds any real power over you. They can talk. They can perform. They can invent a new story. They can find someone else to continue their game of control. But you are no longer standing there to take part in it. You have returned to the center of your own life. You are no longer a supporting character in their drama. No longer the one carrying the role of the victim so they can play the powerful one. No longer the mirror they use to gaze at their false image. You have taken back your own light. And that light is no longer used to guide the way for someone who once tried to drag you into darkness. It is used to lead you home back to yourself. So, together, we have gone through all 7 signs that show the narcissist is gradually losing control over you. And as today's video comes to a close, I want to leave you with a few final words. After going through these 7 signs, perhaps you have touched a very important truth. The narcissist's power was never truly in their own hands. It lived in your reactions, in your fear, in your attachment, in the long nights when you tormented yourself, and the moment you quietly take all of that back, they suddenly have nothing left to hold on to. You do not need to hurt anyone in order to win your freedom. You also do not need to win a game of control that you should never have entered in the first place. The only thing you need to do is return to your intuition, to your worth, and to the peace you always deserve to protect. These 7 signs are not meant for you to use as a tool to measure or judge others. They are a mirror for you to look back at yourself, so you can see that with each passing day, you are healing, becoming stronger, and slowly returning to being the master of your own life. No matter where you are on this journey, whether you are just beginning to recognize the truth, or you have already walked a long road, I hope you remember this. Your calmness is not indifference. It is strength. And the light within you, the light someone once tried to extinguish, has never truly gone out. If this video touched you, even through just one sentence, please leave a like so I know that what was shared today truly meant something to you. And if you want to continue walking with stories about healing, growth, and the journey of finding yourself again, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you will not miss the next videos. You can also leave a comment sharing how you feel, or send this video to someone you believe really needs to hear these words right now. Thank you for staying until the very last moment. Keep your peace, and I will see you again in the upcoming videos.